BioWare, I trusted you. I had my doubts, but I trusted you enough to even spend the mandatory $100 to play your game. And well, you had to go and ruin it, didn't you? Star Wars: The Old Republic. Star Wars: The Old Republic is developed by BioWare and published by EA, Electronic Arts. Although the combination had many skepticism, I was optimistic about this back in the day. Well, they sure proved me wrong, didn't they? What can I say about this game apart from my obvious love-hate relationship with it? There are things I love about it, and things I hate. I'm going to try to get through this as relatively painless as I can, putting aside frustrations if need be, skimming through the details and trying to look at the big picture. Now, let's start at the beginning. Star Wars: The Old Republic, as you probably know, did not start as a free-to-play game, and although it adopted the free-to-play model after its failure as a subscription game, it still didn't really adopt a free-to-play model per se, but I'll get to that later. First thing I hate about Star Wars: The Old Republic, a mandatory fee of $100 to play it. Being €50 to buy the game, and another €25 for a 2-month subscription to activate the game, and the 30-day subscription it came with, you do the math and a little currency exchange, and that's $100 right there and out of your pocket. For argument's sake, in America it was $75, and it isn't EA's and BioWare's fault that laws, regulations and whatnot have all games in Europe at an equivalent numeric value, although the currency is different. But even at $75, it is a pretty steep price. The 3 months total subscription time are pointless, because at the end of the day, you still pay $75 just to see the game and what it's made of, to decide if you like it. At which point, if you don't like it, that is 75 slaps in your face. One will note that I do not agree with the subscription model, and I never did from day one, but I will not sidetrack to talk about all that. It is neither the place nor the time. I have even written blog articles on the matter, and quite frankly, I'm all burnt out explaining the matter again and again. So why did I buy it? Are you kidding? It was Star Wars, the only Star Wars RPG game out there that included a vast galaxy and lore of Star Wars, single player or multiplayer. No other Star Wars title has that much RPG depth in it. The screenshots looked good, they promised real-time combat system, and well, lightsabers and Jedi. Better still, BioWare was on the job. I loved their games. I was sure that I was bound to experience story elements that would simply make me smile. It was a bit of a gamble, but it felt like a sure gamble. Fast forward to today's time. The game is now a free-to-play title and acceptable for my Let's Play for free videos. Problem is, the free-to-play model it has, I have yet to see a more limited free-to-play model than one in this game. And I was a non-subscriber, which means I get some extra perks, and even so it still feels limited beyond logic. Limits to character creations are okay, this I can agree to, but when you start putting limits to things like chat functions, then you really have lost sight of what you're doing. Really? I have to go level 15 to be able to use the chat box? They even have limits to the amount of credits you can collect. That is the in-game currency, which furthermore deprives you of purchasing a range of items or services that are available with in-game credits, forcing you one way or another to spend your cash on the game. More on the limits of the game, you have absurd limits to how many PvP matches you can play per week and other ridiculous restrictions of the sort, not to mention some prestigious items that you need to pay to unlock, that, unless I am mistaken, last time I checked, create an effect that balances the game a little to the pay-to-win side of the scale. Other things include unlocking abilities at earlier levels, which again tips over to the pay-to-win scenario subconsciously, even though they really do affect PvE conditions, thus, ultimately, they aren't really pay-to-win. Still, they sure do give that feeling, even if it isn't so. You can see where I'm going with all this, so I will stop it right there and leave it for the fact that the game is not truly a free-to-play game. It is more like a demo or a trial version, with which you still need to pay a crap load to get access to some very basic content, or furthermore become a subscriber to have all these things unlocked. The problem I will have to say with all this is basically the fact that the game was actually designed to be a subscription game from the start up, which really in the end does create a limit to what they can make purchasable with money in real life currency and whatnot. So I think that again it's 100% not really their fault. It's just that the translation from a subscription game to a free-to-play game doesn't always go as smoothly as it should or as it could. Next thing on my hate list about this game is the combat. It isn't real time, not by a long shot. Creating some extra distance requirements for certain attacks, taking out the auto attack, barely. And using geometry to block your path of attacks does not make the combat real-time. It simply upgrades the MMO combat that we have been so used to and bored of for the last 10 years now. Attacks are all queued, they have cooldowns, and you end up playing with button mashups on your keyboard to attack the enemy. You end up learning a range of God knows how many skills from all classes, so you can be better prepared which of the 20 skills you're going to use and how to counter each of the dozen skills you're going to come up against. This is not real-time combat. This is a reflex puzzle game simulating attacks and predefined animation sets that sometimes don't make much sense either. At the end of the day, you just end up pressing buttons to see different animations or respond to the buttons pressed against you when playing in PvP. The minute the game requires you to hold down the right mouse button to aim, it's a flop. This mechanic was adopted obviously so beginner players could get a grip of such games as well, especially in titles that had auto attack, resulting in those players we all know of that would activate their skills by pressing on the actual icons at the bottom of the screen. After recycling for 10 years the same mechanics again and again in MMO, I was sure that Star Wars The Old Republic would bring something new to the genre in this area as it claimed it would. And it didn't. In the end, you're stuck memorizing skill trees and animations once again, rather than actually enjoying a real-time combat system. What I do love about this game though is the lore. At last you get to see some pretty cool planets, you get to create a range of Star Wars characters, and the best part about it is that they really made the classes truly enjoyable. You don't need to play with the Jedi alone to enjoy this game. Bounty Hunters are awesome, Republic Commandos are awesome, even Han Solo like scoundrels are just as fun. And the best part of them all is the story. The Old Republic remains, for me, to this day, the ultimate MMO with regards to story. Apart from all the voice acting, the stories really put you into the Star Wars galaxy, and truth be said, this is enough to make all the less favorable combat mechanics bearable, sometimes even fun. You simply prepare yourself, consciously, for a non-real-time combat system and try to enjoy what the rest of the game has to offer. And it does have a lot to offer. A drawback to the whole story structure remains to be the MMO standard of 100 quests and the fact that they're all tailored to levels. This again is an MMO mechanic that I really don't enjoy. You want or need to level up because it's the point of the game, but you can't skip too many quests otherwise you won't level up smoothly, unless you play PvP. But that has its limits, which means you then need to buy unlocks. And what if you want to play all the quests because you like the lore? You sure do end up getting bored being on the same place for too long and want to head off to another planet. At which point, you need the quests, or want them, since at times you can't get them later on once you have surpassed their level requirements. Hence you start to skip the story and plot from a select amount of quests, making the strongest element of the game to begin with pointless. Basically, it's a structure as a whole that backfires on itself. The planets at times feel large, and in other occasions they feel really small and crowded. The fact that they have level requirements on them means that in the end you are not playing a true RPG experience, where you head off to a planet or planets and enjoy your own story arcs. This could have been possible with a little more clever design to the planets, and ultimately, the way it is at the moment, your choices of planets for exploration at times do not exceed that of 2. There are, as I remember, some occasions where you can quest along on 2 different planets, but this is not a common trait of the entire game. The graphics of the game are bliss, the animations, appalling. Although after a more comical color palette, the colors, art and designs are truly wonderful. Personally, I would have enjoyed the grittier and realistic color palette more, but this does not mean that they didn't do a great job with it as it is. Even as it is, I find moments where I truly enjoy the scenery and there are some amazing map designs. A drawback to this, again, is the MMO structure of the game, where in 9 out of 10 locations you cannot roam around a planet carelessly and simply enjoy the planet and scenery as it is. You are constantly paying attention to the mobs roaming around in every corner spread to every inch of the map just for the sake of it, or the sake of grinding and cramming up quests all over the place. And usually you spend much less time to pay attention to the wonder in the maps that they have created and end up focusing on the lesser part of the game, the combat mechanic, outdated and 10 years old. The variety of planets is simply awesome. Again, one of the best, if not the best, Star Wars RPGs out there. The lore, locations, and loot in the game is really up there. Smaller level loot becomes a bore, like all MMOs I guess, but not as bad as other titles. The fleets, both Republic and Imperial, where all your needs are crammed up into one place, are really Star Wars-like, and a lot of attention to detail has been put into the game. And for argument's sake once more, here, take a look at this running animation. Seriously, it's lame. One thing about this game that deviates from other MMO experiences is the fact that it has space battles. Initially there were rail missions in space, Your craft flies around a set path and you control the cursor to blast enemies out of the sky, or actually out of space. This was perhaps the most real-time aspect of the game, and even as a rail shooter, very fun. It has an arcade feel to it, and some of the space battles are really well designed. Later on, with one of the most current additions to the game, space battles became at last completely real-time and moved from PvE environments to PvP environments. I played through the tutorial for this and I have to say, it feels, seems and looks simply awesome. This for me now is enough to compensate for the real-time combat which is missing on the planets. It isn't really Star Wars without some space battles, and finally they gave us space battles. Problem is, you have to wait God knows how long to even enjoy one. I personally wasted something like 2 hours queued up and I never got to enjoy a single space battle. Overall, the Old Republic is not something memorable that you really need to get your hands on unless you're a Star Wars fan. The free-to-play limitations along with the outdated combat and game mechanics from a decade ago do not make up for all the great lore, unless you are really into it. Meanwhile, the graphics, although not necessarily crap, they again hold a sentimental value if you're a Star Wars fan rather than being the content of a game that you simply shouldn't miss out on. I mean, let's take Tatooine. I find myself enjoying the map so much and loving every corner and every minute of it, but for someone not into Star Wars, it's nothing more than just a desert with huts. I'll probably have to say the Old Republic is a 5 out of 10, if that. For a Star Wars fan, it is a great time and perhaps 7 out of 10. It lacks in some exhilarating experiences, though makes up for them with a great amount of Star Wars lore. End of the day, even for a Star Wars fan, it's nothing more than an occasional dose of Star Wars lore and great sound effects and music when need be, only to be left again on the side the next time you miss this galaxy far, far away. And that's pretty much it on Star Wars The Old Republic. Thank you all for watching the first episode to Let's Play for free. If you enjoyed what you saw, don't forget to like or comment on the video, and also don't forget to subscribe and check my other videos out too. This was Has Reborn, and I'll see you next time. Would have been nice if the loading times were somewhat shorter though. Seriously, this happens for every planet. Really baffles me.